And next up, we have Chris Moyer, the CTO of Exelon. He'll be talking about the evolution of the EV ecosystem and providing us a viewpoint from the utility standpoint. Chris?
Hey, John, thanks. Thanks for having me in. Really enjoy the sessions. Look, you always get a lot of insight from the exchanges going on in these kinds of forums, and really appreciate you guys pulling us into this. I am Chris Moyer. I work at Exelon. For those that don't know what Exelon Corporation does, we're a leading diversified energy company. We provide reliable, clean, affordable energy products. Our utilities serve about 10 million customers, whether that's in Delaware, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Maryland, Illinois, in the District of Columbia. So think of us as east of the Mississippi, big energy provider with a lot of customers that rely on us. It's great to go after Jeff, and I like the fact that he's got Amazon paying your electric bill. So that was a very good intro, and I'm sure it wasn't intentional, but we appreciate it. And he's absolutely correct. People want convenience. Look, we probably get thought of on the energy sector as kind of on the supply side of this whole enabling, vehicle electrification, and that's true, right? We're responsible for the grid. We've got to make sure that it's reliable and available. But for Exelon specifically, we're also leaning in hard on the demand side. We have a internal and publicized goal to get our internal fleet, which is pretty extensive, at 30% EV by 2025. Actually, 30% by 2025 and 50% by 2030, which, considering it's 2021, we all know is not that far away. But as an energy provider, we also know we can't do this alone. And the real theme of today's conversation is the ecosystem that it takes to actually get adoption, to drive the percentage up, to take the early adopter successes that many of you probably enjoy today, right? You're probably EV users. Many of the folks in this audience today, you've been a vehicle-centric group for a long time. So your interest in the evolution, the technology, the changes is there. But we're just a part, and we know we're just a part. While we've got a big responsibility to maintain a reliable transmission and distribution mechanism for energy, which powers not just our economy, but our lives, the health and safety of our communities that we live in. But EV creates a different workload. And while we understand that workload and plan for it, the real challenge is predicting, then planning, then acting on that demand. And that is definitely our responsibility. We do that, we think, well. There's always times when we think we can do better, as everybody in any industry does. We challenge ourselves to do more, but we're continuing to watch this growing trend and then trying to take that, predict it, fit it into our digitization of the grid, and make sure that we're enabling our consumers, which, we think about people at their houses as a big consumer, but the reality is there's a big commercial consumer component to this. And we understand that because we're going through that electrification of our own fleet right now. And that's a big changeover for us. It's a changeover in how our yards are set up for EVs to be able to do that. We had a lot of experience doing that in the public transportation domain for many of the communities that we serve. That tight part of the community is another part of the ecosystem, right? We are very tightly integrated in the communities. We go to market as brands, and I live in Chicago, so the brand is definitely ComEd, and we're very much, ComEd is our brand there. Everybody knows ComEd. They know they're our energy provider. They see our trucks and our people out maintaining the environment. But we play a key role in educating. We have a really strong community outreach. And so when we talk about EV, we talk about the benefits of where it shows up in cleaner air, in a different environment, and trying to figure out how to serve that to our entire community. Because like any other big metropolitan area, it's got diversity in it. It's got different socioeconomic conditions in different parts of it. It's got different distances between spaces. So a way that embracing EV will happen will definitely change. But we're also trying to make sure that we are enabling, right? And enabling in ways that are important to the consumers. So is that tuning our rates to be EV and peak hour or off hour rates? Because most charging is still done at home. Do we lean in with the communities and our regulators on rebates and incentives to get there? We do. Do we make it easier to be able to schedule and plan for charging points, absolutely. And then starting to work at, even more on how do you get public charging out. I think while the residential model is dominant, we all know that people want to be able to use and have access to charging when they're out and about, whether that's going to work or going to do things that are more play. We also will be that example. I mentioned our fleet and how much we're tweaking our fleet to be really EV centered as we go into the next 10 years. We also work with our public utilities to help them electrify. I think that based on some of the studies that we've seen, in a recent SECC study shows that 2/3 of people expect their utility company to show up with an EV footprint, and 2/3 expect their public services to kind of have the same, whether that's public transport or whether that's public services that are delivered. So I don't think that the community is missing things at all, and they're part of that ecosystem and will really help drive that. The government's role is something you can't overlook. Many of us understand that. We've been very close to doing, more and more at the federal level. Biden's new executive order on what he's looking for, specific states, probably California and New Jersey leading some of the charges there, but more states leaning in with expectations, with mandates to their service sectors, to their constituents, both commercial and individuals. And then really state and local, where it gets very specific and it gets very tactical, and making sure that communities, city centers have the kind of infrastructure, charging infrastructure specifically, to support more use. We're even trying to do things with in a quasi-government way. We've got a rideshare program that we've done with Baltimore Gas and Electric out in the Baltimore market, working directly with Lyft to put 100 EVs. That sounds like a small number, and I'm sure somebody out there will go, that's not big enough. The idea here is to seed the use and the demand. If people have access under a rideshare program to an EV product, they get more comfortable with it. They learn it, they understand it, they ask the questions. And when you look at how rideshare tends to, the stats we get, at least from working with the BGE and Lyft on this one, is 2/3 of the rides come from what we probably consider low and medium income areas. So people that may not be instantly jumping to buying an EV. And also a person is 35 to 40% more likely to consider an EV if they've had experience of an EV, and especially the rideshare just creates that opportunity to have more and more people experience it. It's kind of part of that education and getting to see, touch, and feel what an EV feels like and how it works, and talk to a driver about, well, what do you do? What's your process like? Because people are very accustomed to the internal combustion approach that we're very comfortable with today. The ecosystem also includes the OEMs. I think that you just saw the number of OEMs adopting Alexa, which is fantastic. OEMs are able to drive the use of the electric vehicle capabilities, but they're also doing a lot of the innovation and driving some of the cost points. So what are we looking for? I think from that ecosystem, we continue to look for variety of vehicles. We want affordability to continue to improve, and that's happening with battery tech. It's happening with different models. Targeting different segments of the buying consumer is great. Look, for us personally, we know there's a gap in the kind of medium duty, heavy duty space, which is where, as a commercial buyer, that's really important to us. That's lower volume, but it's got a pretty big impact on the greenhouse gas emissions, because a lot of those vehicles spend a big part of their time idling. They get to a site, they do work, but they use the features and capabilities of that device or that vehicle at that location. So you got a lot of idle time that needs to be there. And then I think the OEMs really do set the expectation on what are the charging standards going to be as they transform, innovate, adopt net new technology. They're changing what's expected in that standard space. And so continuing to work with that ecosystem of players and understand what's coming next, what that does to what's already installed, whether we leave things behind or we can carry everything forward. Really important. That the technology and innovation speed definitely is very quick in that OEM domain, and I'm sure every one of you has seen it across your your activities, and you've seen it at this conference, right, with some of the players that are here. The ecosystem's not complete with just that. You need consortiums. You need cross industry. You need thinking outside the box. You need consortiums like this one, which really help us tune, refine, define, and explore what are the options, right? Because there isn't just one way to do this. There isn't a single path to getting us to 50 or 60% EV in the future, or even closer to 100% somewhere out there. But we've got to continue to drive and reuse things. And I think consortium opportunities like this give us the chance to debate, explore, find the connections, build that ecosystem, extend it, and then make it more mainstream so that it's easier for others to adopt and use. I also love the information exchange, right? Getting a chance to get a lot of information, a lot of content in a condensed place, where I don't have to do all the research. I'm sure every one of us in here has done some research and some chasing down details. And the reality is it's really, really hard to get all of the facts in one spot. So having a place where I can go get that is really important to us. So I think the last part of the ecosystem is the individuals, right? The people that are making the purchasing decisions, and that consumer side of it. We talk a lot about consumer tech. The speaker just before me was anchored in a consumer domain. That's great, right? Because people have to want the devices. They have to want EVs. They have to be comfortable that an EV can be their commute vehicle, just like it can be their vacation vehicle, just like it can, if they forget to do something and charge, can they still go do their daily tasks? It's that kind of mindset that is going to drive it. And then they've got to be able to buy, which probably has an ecosystem of financiers and where will the government subsidizing fall into in the future? Consumers' behavior is tricky to predict. As we know, as I'm sure most of the others in this consortium understand, that the consumer is fickle. They do change their mind. They're watching this crossover point on total cost of ownership on internal combustion versus EV. They're starting to see the potential for that crossover to be beneficial to them. And we've got to watch that go mainstream now, right? We need the consumers to be willing to make their primary purchase an EV as opposed to maybe their secondary purchase, which is happening in some markets. And you can find all that data out there and look at it. It's the trend is changing. And that's when I kind of all the way back to what role do we play? We're trying to watch those patterns, understand and predict what that's going to do to the grid requirements, and then prep with large infrastructure projects, complex infrastructure projects to deliver that capability where it's needed, when it's needed. It's a responsibility we absolutely hold first and foremost in our thinking around how we treat the grid. All of that ecosystem, anchored, focused, helping, will get us over some of the barriers, right? We all talk about the barriers. I don't think any one person can fix the barriers. And that's what I mean about the importance of the ecosystem. First, that total cost of ownership. It is a barrier even to us as a company looking at what's it going to cost. And that cost is everything from standing up the infrastructure to be able to do effective and efficient charging, to number of vehicles and types available, and what we can do with those vehicles for the kind of workloads we have. That price point, that total cost of ownership for a company, probably a little bit bigger and complex calculation than I would have at home. But at home, it's the same, right? If I've got to install charging station, what's that going to cost? If I've got to buy the vehicle, what's the acquisition cost versus the running cost? How long am I going to keep it? Where is that crossover? What's the maintenance like? How do I get it repaired? All those things that as vehicle users, and all of us are probably in this audience with a few exceptions, those of you that live in a city center and can rely on public transport, I'm jealous at times because I sometimes can and I sometimes can't. But it is very much an opportunity for us to keep driving down that TCO. And that's going to take the innovations. It's going to take battery innovation, manufacturing innovation, offering innovation, kind of the sets. Range anxiety continues to be something that we lean in on. We lean in on that with our community partners, and that range anxiety extends outside of the normal commute. So as I'm starting to think about that primary vehicle, or maybe the only vehicle being EV, I need to be able to make that trip to grandma's house, which may be not just over the river and through the woods, but outside of my range. And I've got to be able to predict how I'm going to get recharged and ready to come back from grandma's house. It's critical for us, and that needs us to continue to lean in, both to provide utility sponsored capability, but also to enable public sector and other companies that are deciding how they're going to do charging activity. And we continue to lean in on that. We know that we've got a responsibility. As you start to break from one community to another, there's got to be more collaboration amongst those to make sure that we've got the charging infrastructure across broader swaths of the geography we live in, to make sure that people can move about freely and not be concerned. I think we still have a barrier on education and awareness. I think the government has a role to play, but I think it's much more about people that live in the communities with people. I think the OEMs are doing a fabulous job of advertising and changing perceptions of EV, but we've got a role too as a trusted partner in the community to keep sharing what we're doing, to continue to create the kind of opportunities and ways for people to easily get EV up and running. And then I think the consortiums like this have got a really important role. You have to publicize what we're doing here, and we got to make sure that gets out, not just to the group of us that are interested, because we do want to change the way we move around the country, but we also want the clean air and the impact that comes from it. And then finally, we got to have some more options. I think that maybe that's a tricky one for us, because we focused on the personal EVs to start with. But when you start to think about public transportation, some of the things that are being done, school buses definitely see a lot of energy and focus there. We got to continue to look at the commercial side of the world. There's a lot of movement of goods, services, and people with specialized equipment to certain activities and tasks. And so we've got to have more options to break through the barriers. So I think I'm coming up on time, John, and I want to just kind of end with maybe a dialogue around what's moving fast and what's moving slower, and just recognizing those different speeds. I think that innovation and technology is advancing way faster than standards are coalescing and getting adopted. And that sometimes creates some change and some friction we got to watch for. But that, even the speed of that, while I may get frustrated by it, is still faster than the speed of regulatory change and legislative change. And we've got to be patient there, especially as the regulated side of our business. We've got to play by those sets of rules and be very conscious to them. But we've got to see regulation continue to evolve closer to the pace of standards and innovation. Not the same. It needs more consideration. It's got to consider all citizens, not just the early adopters or even the mainstream adopters. But I think at the end of the day, we have to stay focused. We've got to continue to collaborate as an ecosystem. We've got to pay attention to the consumer and their trends. We've got to address some of the commercial needs, because look, the prize is really big, right? If we stay focused, if we stay on track, for our kids, for their kids, and even for their kids, we're trying to make the place that they call home, that they live, work, and thrive in. We're trying to make it safer, cleaner, more habitable for them. So with that, thanks again, John, for having me.